Professor Andrew Latham, I benefited from your insights when we spoke before Donald Trump announced these tariffs, and you said it's impossible to get into the man's head. Now that we've seen what he's announced, can you just begin by explaining to everyone watching what you think is the most likely impact on the American economy? Donald Trump thinks this will bring manufacturing back to the United States. A lot of economists are convinced that it won't. Explain why you think these tariffs might or might not work. Professor Latham.
Well, they won't work because they're premised on a false assumption and frankly, economic illiteracy. This is not 1913 and it's not 1930. It's 2025. And these tariffs, whether they're merely a bargaining chip, sometimes he frames it that way, but at a deeper level, President Trump is framing this as we're going to create a tariff walls that will bring manufacturing back to the United States. But he seems to think this is going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months, which is why he keeps giving a month reprieve and another month reprieve, as if you can stand up a factory to manufacture automobile parts in 30 days. It's completely ridiculous. And then the other silly slash scary assumption he's making is that somehow he can do away with the income tax and replace it with the income from tariffs, which was Hamilton's view back in 1913. The difference is, back in 1913, of course, the federal government was just basically the armed forces and the post office. You could finance it that way. But this federal government in the United States is huge. You cannot finance it through tariffs and doing away with income tax and corporate taxes and whatnot. And, you know, he came into office making a promise. He was going to reduce taxes. He was going to improve, enhance the sort of cost of living. $6 trillion over 10 years, which is what he's talking about in terms of the tariffs, in fact, is a tax. And every time you hear the word tariff, you need to hear the word tax as well. This is a $6 trillion tax increase. His base, they're going to cheer him in the short term. But in
Professor Latham, a lot of economists are saying that this is going to lead America into recession. What is the probability, in your view, of America slipping into recession? How soon is this likely to happen? And if America slips into recession, what is the impact, in your view, on global growth and the consequential impact on the growth of countries like India?
We're already seeing the stock market taking a nosedive. We're likely to see Americans pulling back in terms of purchasing things, buying things. So that's going to result in a contraction of the American economy. That's bad for Americans, but it's also bad for the world because this country is a huge market. And if the market contracts, as it's going to, as it's already started to, it's going to have a huge impact, not just on the United States and American citizens, but on Indians and Canadians and Europeans and Thais, and I can obviously go on. Everybody who sells into the U.S. is going to find a much smaller marketplace. And that, in fact, in turn, rather, is going to have an impact on their own domestic production. If you're selling pineapples to the United States and Americans are buying fewer pineapples, that's going to have a negative impact on your economy.
Sushant Sareen, you've been studying the potential impact of Trump's tariffs. For everyone watching this morning, try and explain how this is likely to impact Indian companies exporting to the U.S.
No, I'm guessing that the
Sushant?
people. Can you hear me, Rahul? Can you hear me?
I hear you well.
Okay. So, Rahul, it depends upon the various companies that are exporting to the United States. I'm sure they're going to be, bringing out their calculators. Now, we don't know whether these tariffs are an across the board 26% tariff, which is being levied, or is it going to be differentiated according to different sectors? But I think at one level, to the extent that it impacts upon US demand and the demand goes down, it will have some impact. But I think in relative terms, because these tariffs are not just on India, but they're on all the countries. So, for example, if we are exporting textiles or garments to the United States, the tariffs on the Bangladeshis are, I believe, 37% now. On the Pakistanis, about 29%. These are also big exporters to the United States. India is just 26%. So maybe there are some margins out there for us. On Vietnam, it goes up to almost 44% thereabouts. So maybe there is space for us. Our dilemma will be the same as the US dilemma. Just because Donald Trump is imposing massive tariffs on his major trade partners, does that mean, as Professor Latham was saying, does that mean that manufacturing will go back? Maybe some manufacturing will go back. But will the Americans start manufacturing garments from tomorrow, right? They're not going to do that. Will they start manufacturing Nike shoes from tomorrow? Or any of those other US companies which have invested in factories abroad and using low manufacturing base, which is basic common economics 101, that as a nation becomes advanced technologically, it moves up the value chain, and things which are lower down the value chain move to other countries, which is what happened in China, for example. The Chinese didn't start making high-tech stuff when they started off their economic reforms program. They have now moved over the last 7, 8, 10 years, they moved into the high-tech and really advanced economic stuff, engineering goods. They didn't move out there overnight. Can the US now go back down the value chain? I don't think that's going to be possible. So it's certainly going to impact upon the US market, demand in the US, because the cost of things will go up. But how does it disrupt international trade? And to the extent that it disrupts international trade, there will be an impact on us, because almost 45-46% of Indian GDP comes from foreign trade. And if foreign trade across the globe is going to get disrupted really badly, and it is going to get disrupted, I think that's a no-brainer, then certainly it will have some deleterious effects on the Indian economy and Indian companies as well. But I don't think it is a single dimensional thing. The tariffs have gone up, and so the Indian companies are going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm sure, given the kind of stupidity which happens in stock markets, where, suddenly sentiments lead to massive rises or spikes and massive falls, probably the stock markets are going to take a beating today. But I don't think in the aggregate, it's going to have a very, very significant impact on the Indian economy itself, simply because we are not alone in this.